was asking if Mayor Pro Tem Gardner is there.
Don't see him yet.
Yep, I'm here. Is the mayor not here?
Doesn't seem like it. Would you be willing to kick us off?
Yep, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Katie, can you call the roll?
Mayor Kaufman, Councilmember Bergen,
Here.
Councilmember Coombs,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner,
Here.
Councilmember Drinsky,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Marcano,
Present.
Councilmember Medina, Councilmember Murillo,
Present.
Councilmember Sundberg,
Here.
and Councilmember Zvonek.
Here.
There's a quorum.
All right. Item number 1A, Mayor's Update, 2023 Aurora Mental Health and Recovery ARPA Construction Agreement. Jessica Prosser, Tim Joyce, and then also outside speaker Kathy Snell from Aurora Mental Health and Recovery.
Mayor and Council, I believe Kathy Snell is not on yet. Our understanding was this got moved later in the meeting, so I can try to get her on, but she was providing a brief overview of the project. I know we did this at study session in May, so if Council would like that overview, we can hold the item and I can get her on. Otherwise, it's not different than what was presented by Aurora Mental Health in May of 2023 related to the construction of the Potomac campus.
Okay. I think we could wait till Kathy's on then.
Okay.
Item number 2A, consent calendar. Any opposition to moving forward with the consent calendar? Hearing none, that'll move forward. Item number 3A, Recreation Fund and Open Space, Natural Resources, Financial Sustainability. Brooke Bell.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Sorry about being late. Go ahead. Brooke Bell.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Are you able to hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Brooke Bell, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Tonight, I'm going to speak on the financial sustainability of the Recreation Fund, and we'll also share information regarding open space and natural resources operations. And Adrian, do you have that presentation up? Are you able to see a presentation? No.
Not yet.
No, no presentation.
And we just tested this a little while ago. Adrian, can you hear me?
Brooke, this is Katie. If you want to forward the presentation to me, I can assist. I don't know what's happening right now.
No, I got it. But all right, here, let's try this again. Let's do screen one. Share this puppy.
There we go.
There we go.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, that's solar. Let's see. Do you have?
I know. It's fine. I gotcha. Here we go, Brooke. Go ahead.
Great. Do you have the first slide of the recreation presentation? The solar is what's showing right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, the wrong presentation.
Adrian, it should be the recreation presentation.
Okay. Gotcha. Brooke, you got so many presentations tonight. I'm telling you right now.
So I'll just introduce it while he's bringing it up. During this presentation, I'll review high-level financial information related to pre- and post-pandemic recreation operations and identify additional ongoing and emerging financial challenges in recreation. The Recreation Fund revenues are primarily generated from fees for services. So Adrian, if you could go to the next slide, please, and if you could put it in presentation mode, please.
I will.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay. So the recreation fund revenues are generated from fees for services, and the recreation fund also receives a transfer from the general fund that's also known as the general fund subsidy. As you can see on this slide, the gray portion of the chart represents the general fund subsidy. The revenues represented are by the blue line, the blue bars, and then the expenses are shown on the red line. Typically, the general fund subsidy increases with changes in wages and utilities only. Prior to 2020, the subsidy was equivalent to approximately 45% of the recreation fund operating budget. We've seen an increase over time. The general fund subsidy is now 61% of the revenue of the recreation fund operating budget. Since the onset of the pandemic in 2020, the recreation fund remains financially challenged. The post-pandemic reality is lower program registrations. Revenues are down $3 million compared to 2019. And while programming participation lags pre-pandemic levels, program demand is increasing. We are seeing some increases in interest in programming. Next slide, Adrian. This chart shows a comparison of monthly revenues over 3 key years. 2019, the year before the pandemic, in green. 2020, 3 years post-pandemic, in red. And 2023 with the Southeast Recreation Center opening in January, in blue. The overarching concern in the Recreation Fund revenues have not recovered to pre-pandemic levels, considering a new Recreation Center opened in 2023. Next slide. Additionally, new and ongoing challenges are driving Recreation Fund expenses higher. These include expenses for security services at our facilities. Many of the recreation facilities are older and require capital repairs and amenity replacements. Inflation in supplies and services and employee wages have had a significant impact on our expenses as well. Next slide, please. I've shared the why. I'm here to talk, to share the information about Recreation Fund's future. Now I'll focus on how PROS plans to move forward to address our financial challenges. The key point here is that the Recreation Fund must make changes, our recreation services must make changes to be financially sustainable without significant growth in the general fund subsidy. Actions we've taken to date include increased use of professional services agreements, eliminating programs that are better served by the private sector, transitioning more services to contracts, and the recreation staff worked with a consultant to develop a cost recovery methodology, which I'll share with you tonight. Today, I'm introducing that cost recovery model and looking for your comments. Next slide. PRO staff worked with the consultant 110%, a company that has worked with hundreds of parks and recreation organizations across North America to find solutions to ensure long-term health for their systems. The focus of the work was to build a thoughtful financial strategy that incorporates a cost recovery model and uses data to inform decision-making. The cost recovery goals that you see today are unique to the city of Aurora. The cost recovery goals and categories may be refined as PROS builds specific fee recommendations and assesses the fee impacts on the Recreation Fund and our users. The chart you see here shows the basic assumptions that guide the cost recovery model. The programs and uses are categorized along a continuum. The scale at the bottom of the chart goes from the common good to the individual benefit. These are the users. The vertical scale on the left goes from high subsidy, low cost recovery at the bottom to low subsidy, high cost recovery at the top. The categories across the purple ribbon were developed with recreation staff input and showed groupings of like-type programs. So for example, open access and community events categories include parks, spray grounds, outdoor courts, events and expectations. And the expectation here is that these are free to use or attend. As you move along the continuum, you go up the purple ribbon. There are beginners and intermediate level activities, example, swim lessons. The expectation expectation is that every child should know how to swim. And so the cost recovery is lower to limit the barrier to swim lessons. Yet there's still a cost for the program. As you move up the scale to private and semi-private categories, there would be a higher cost recovery expectation for individual services. And other examples of services are the higher cost recovery categories, which would include individual renters for party rooms or for profit businesses that use our sports fields. Next slide. This shows a pie chart on the left where it shows the revenue shares for the categories of cost on the cost recovery continuum. The categories with the highest revenue share will be the areas of focus for recreation. This includes center admission fees that have not changed since 2017. Field rentals are 20% of the recreation revenues, and staff will consider rental fee policies that will incorporate the cost of field maintenance and supply inflation. There is also opportunities to add more to demand in beginning level programs. So for instance, you see 45% here. These are beginning programs. For example, swim lessons. We have significant wait lists for swim lessons. Next slide, please. This is moving on to open space and natural resources. The same process, a different group of what's for common good. That would include the Plains Conservation Center and Morrison Nature Center, Trick or Treat Trail, for example. Programs for individual benefit would be access to the Aurora and Quincy reservoirs, for example. Next slide. So for open space and natural resources, the area of focus is the largest piece of that pie. It's admission fees. And so our plan is to expand the $15 per vehicle weekend rate to 7 days a week during the time during summer from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We'll also plan to increase fees for boat inspections. Next slide. So I've introduced the cost recovery model. We are developing monthly financial reports. We used to do this pre-pandemic, and we are bringing this back. We're also want to refine the model and recommend specific fee increases and revenue targets for the spring workshop, and establish interim financial goals for the spring workshop. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for discussion and comments. Questions?
Question?
Questions?
Uh,
Any questions?
Yes. Oh.
Okay.
So on the Southeast Rec Center, when the pool was closed, did that impact us too much? I mean, it closed twice.
It did, and that was a few weeks, but I would say the impact, there was a financial impact, but I would say it's nominal. For the Southeast Recreation Center, we're about half of our financial target. We need to find a way to monetize that field house.
Right.
I am expecting during the winter months, we did see an increase. There's a lot of teams that want to come in during the winter months. Where we saw significant softening was during the summer months. So finding a way to monetize that year round and get the revenues we need from that particular asset.
Yeah, and that was going to be my second point was on the field house, because I know I have heard a lot of interest in using the field house, but you make a really good point that it would probably be more optimal during the winter than the summertime. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Brooke, Michael, who did the initial analysis in terms of, let's say, you know, when we were building the field house and expanding programs, what were the assumptions? Because it seems like we significantly underestimated the situation.
There was, Mayor Kaufman, I'll have to get that information, but there was a cost impact analysis. It was done by Wheatlands. We did not do one at the time. It was done by Wheatlands, and they showed in their cost impact analysis that the both could operate in the same realm. And then with regard to Central, before the pandemic and we were making decisions around the Southeast Recreation Center, the first 9 months that Central was open, it was exceeding our expectations. So we used the same analysis there where it would bring in, the expectation was bring in $1.5 million of revenue annually. And that Central was meeting that in the first 9 months. It was on track, and then COVID happened.
So, so what were the assumptions for Southeast Rec Center?
Southeast
Because
Recreation Center was
Wheatland was
identical to
saying-
Central with 1.5 million. It was to bring in 1.5 million in revenue and 500,000 for the subsidy. So 75% of its operating costs. The operating costs were budgeted at 2 million. So it was to bring in 75% of its operating costs and subsidize 25%.
Yeah, because the Wheatland study
Revenue would be
was more
by
to show-
entry fees and programming.
Yeah, the Wheatland study, I think, was more to show that Wheatlands could coexist with the Southeast Rec Center. Okay, further questions?
Mayor,
Councilmember Lawson.
yeah, Brooke, thank you. In your presentation, you stated that you're going to probably work with private businesses or private, I guess, companies for the programming. Have you developed a strategy of how you're going to do that? Is that part of this, this study that was done?
We have not developed that strategy. That's work that we still need to do. We know that we've effectively done it for years with Taekwondo. We are experimenting with a fitness instructor, and should fitness be a professional services agreement. We're also, there was another area, and we've done this on the golf side. So there are golf lessons. Some of the golf lessons are done by private partners, and then the restaurants, but we do need more work around that area.
Other questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember Zavonic and Councilmember McCollum.
Just a quick question, Brooke, just because I'm familiar with, there are a bunch of youth sports programs in Aurora. The Spartans, it comes to mind for me. And I wonder, do we do any, or have we done any kind of proactive marketing to them, because they're always looking for field space. I mean, I remember, when my son was in Little League, that was one of the challenges. And I think that knowing that indoor space is available, there's also programs like, and I know Phenom Factory, I think they were renting from there for some period of time, but with that field, I can't imagine there should be a day of the week that's not being occupied. There is so much demand, and it particularly as the weather turns. I can't see us not filling that if there's an intentional, proactive approach being taken.
I would agree with you. Yes, and we need to do that. Yes.
Councilmember McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Brooke, for the update. And I just want to reiterate a little bit of what we discussed in August in committee, that I'm good with y'all, exploring cost recovery, but I just really want to make sure that we're keeping in mind that there are under-resourced communities that really depend on the services here. So we want to make sure not to price them out. And I also want to bring up, because this is something I've heard a lot of over the last 4 years, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues have as well, that there's a large demand for rec centers to be free at the point of use for youth in the city. So maybe if we can try to find a way to incorporate that into the cost recovery scheme, I think that would at the very least be worthy of conversation when we do have this at the spring supplemental. So thank you.
We can look at that as one of the options.
All right, appreciate that.
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, I just want to actually echo what Councilmember Zavonic said. If we had an actual marketing campaign, we would be able to probably, get a lot of youth sports to reserve the field house. So I guess my question is, Brooke, have we spent any money on marketing?
No, very little. No.
But do we have a budget for it? Because I mean, if you don't market, we're not going to be able to get it booked.
Let me look. I right now we have significant. I think we can find a place for marketing in our budget. If I can't, I'll certainly come back and ask for that. But I believe we can find that. in our
And
budget.
then just on the boat inspections, have we raised those recently? You said on the admission fees, we haven't raised them in years, but on the boat inspections?
I would have to confirm that one. I didn't check on that, but we rarely increase fees at Aurora Reservoir, so I would be surprised if boat inspections has changed, but I will follow up with you all on that one.
And that's to make sure that they don't bring in any species that would be dangerous for the reservoir?
Yeah, invasive species, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Sunberg.
Councilmember Sunberg.
Thank you. Thanks, Brooke. Just to clarify a couple things, $3 million down in revenue since 2019, right? And
Annually, yes.
this does not include golf course revenue? That's
No,
separate?
You're correct, no.
Okay. And it looks like the major contributor to revenue is the beginner, intermediate level, and education activities. That includes like youth swimming and things of that sort.
Yes, that's the youth programs are a major contributor along with admissions, yes.
So in that large blue category here, 45%, are there certain programs that you just really noticed a drop in that come to mind?
We have wait lists primarily for aquatics, for swimming, and that's been a challenge having swim instructors. So we need to increase our swim instructors to create the programming.
So staffing is prohibiting lack of staffing is prohibiting revenue growth. Yeah. Okay. That's about all I had. Thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
I just wanted to add kind of into the discussion about other partners that we might be able to work with, looking at nonprofits and community groups who I know have expressed some interest in both the field house and space in general. And so I would suggest just including those folks in whatever marketing program you stand up.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, then thank you very much, Brooke.
Thank you.
Item number 3B, 2023, 2024 snow and ice control plan. Lynn Center, Deputy Director of Operations, Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Lynn Center. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works in charge of operations, and I'm here tonight to present to you our 2023-2024 snow and ice control plan. First, I'm going to do a quick review of the 2022-2023 season, and then I'll launch into the 2023-2024 plan. So here at OPS, our mission is to provide the best possible level of service for the public within our budgetary constraints. When we take a look at last year, compared to our historic, so I've got a few slides here on our historic averages. This shows our annual snowfall clear back to 1951. And last year's is way over here on the right. We ended up with a total snowfall last year of 26, which is way below our historic average of 64 inches. When we look at that month by month, I have month by month back to September 2011. You can see that again, except for January, we're well below our historic average. And this little gap right here, that was February last year when we had no snow in February. Kind of unusual for us because February is usually one of our snowiest months. This graph shows our historical average by month, and you can see that for all of our months except for January last year, we were well below historic average. And January, we were quite significantly above. Anyone who remembers January, we've got pretty consistent snowfalls, and it was really, really, really cold. We also look at our snowstorms based on the category of snow. These categories are set in our snow and ice control plan, so I'll be talking about them in a little bit. But historically, we see 7 storms that are Cat 1, 8 that are Cat 2, 3 that are Category 3, and it's about ends up being about 0.5 snowstorms on average that are above 12 inches or a Category 4. And you can see last year we exceeded our historic average for Category 1, but for all the other categories, we are significantly below our historic average. And last year, 92% of our snowstorms were less than 6 inches. So we take a quick look at costs. I usually compare one season to the previous season. So in 2022, 2023, we spent just over $1.3 million on snow, including some contracted cost for ice removal. Our total cost per resident was about $3.28, which you'll note is a little bit more than half of what we did before in 2021, 2022. And that's simply because we did not get the same amount of snow last year that we did in the year before. Okay, so now I'll launch into our snow and ice control plan. This is a plan that we have been utilizing for a number of years, but we haven't brought it to you recently. So we thought we would bring it to you just to show you some of the changes that we make. We do look at it annually and make changes annually. So it is pretty much a living document, but some things haven't changed. And what hasn't changed are our route priorities and our storm categories. We have 4 route priorities that are based loosely on our roadway classification and are colored on our maps and on the colors that you see here. So our priority 1 routes are shown as red, and they are primarily our arterial routes. The priority 2 routes are shown blue, and they're primarily collectors and roads that service schools and hospitals and fire stations. Priority 3 are our neighborhood collector streets. These are the through streets through a neighborhood. They are residential streets, but they connect to a collector or an arterial street. Those are shown in green on our maps. And our priority 4 routes, our yellow routes, are the main north, south, east, west connectors in the eastern parts of the city. Our storm categories are loosely based on the amount of snow that accumulates. So anything less than 2 inches is a Category 1, 2 to 6 inches is Category 2, 6 to 12 inches is Category 3, and anything over 12 inches is a Category 4. And I'm also showing here the number of storms we've had since 1994 for each category, and then the average number of storms we have per season for each category. So again, you'll see that the majority of our storms are less than 6 inches. This shows a couple of maps that we produced. The one on the right is typically a wall map, and it shows that we divide this area into 17 different snow route maps, 8 in the north and 9 in the south. And then the map on the right is a typical snow route map that we produce, and you'll see again our priorities: red, blue, green, and yellow. Our objective for our snow plan is to really make sure that our main arterial roadway is passable for emergency services and our public safety operations. So that's what hasn't changed. What has changed, as you might imagine, I apologize, we added some routes last year, mostly in the north part of town with all the growth with Aurora Highlands, and some of those streets are coming online for our maintenance. Although we did not add any arterial routes, we did add just under 4 lane miles of collector routes and just under 9 lane miles for our priority 3 routes. To execute our plan, we partner with Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Aurora Water, who and we all 3 provide staff and equipment for road maintenance activities. When we get into a storm that exceeds our capacity, we have contracts already in place for additional equipment and operators. We use 2 types of chemicals on our roadway. One is a solid, that one's on the left. That's a de-icer. We use it to break up snowpack and ice. We also use a liquid that's an anti-icer, so we try to get that down before the snow starts. And this really helps us because we don't plow down to bare pavement during a storm. And that's to keep these materials on the roadway where they're the most effective for us. But this combination of materials allows us to plow down to bare pavement after the storm rather than a sheet of ice. We have nearly 90 pieces of equipment, ranging from our standard tandem axle with a snowplow over on the left-hand side of this slide, all the way up to our large equipment with these really huge snow blowers. So just to summarize some of the changes, as I mentioned, we added blue and green routes. We also added language clarifying the non-prioritized residential streets. We added a section regarding extreme conditions, and we consider those to be either weather or resource related. And the section allows us to call in our contractors when either of those conditions are met. We also This last bullet point was added to the plan to accommodate programs such as the one recently approved and sponsored by Councilmember Bergen to allow special districts and HOAs to plow public residential streets within their boundaries. So all total, we have prioritized just over 1,500 lane miles of roadway for snow removal. And if you want to know how far that is, that's a 2-lane blacktop that's 759 miles long, which is the distance from our Aurora Municipal Center to Columbia, Missouri. So quite a distance. Our snow and ice control plan also includes some guidelines and ideal staffing for storm categories, each storm category. Although no two storms are alike, and a Category 3 snowstorm is very different in December than it is in May. So we will staff to the conditions that we see coming in. So staffing continues to be one of our challenges. It was last year. Street operations is down almost 40%. We have 28 vacant positions in our driver operator positions. Aurora Water is reporting approximately 20% vacancy, and PROS has also reported to us vacancy within that 15 to 20% range. So similar to last year, we've developed some strategies to help address those vacancies. One is to increase our seasonal workers. So we were able to add 2 seasonal workers, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that is at least one route for each shift. So it really helps us out a lot. And then one of the main things that we're going to do in Public Works is call on our partners a little bit earlier than we usually do. So we'll be calling on them in the 2 to 3 inch snowstorm range rather than the 6-inch snowstorm range that we used to. We've also gotten some help from APD and AFR. Last year, APD was able to establish some rescue task forces, and this allows them to sort of be somewhat independent in responding to stranded motorists, and they've also are helping fire get into um, streets and stuff that they need to in responding to calls. So this could help us keep our fleet on the roads plowing snow rather than pulling them off to assist APD and fire. However, if they get in a pinch and and the snowstorm exceeds their capacity, we will always respond to their calls and pull people off the street if we have to. So we looked at how the shortage in staff would impact our level of service. And what we found is that if we decrease our level of service to include priority 2 routes that serve only a school or a hospital or a fire station, we can staff in-house all the way through a Category 3 snowstorm. However, because most of our snows are less than 6 inches, we don't really anticipate needing to move into this modified service level unless we get a really large storm or we get a storm that is really odd for some reason, like really cold or high winds or something like that. In that event, we will call in our contractors to help us out. All of this is allowed by our current policy, so we didn't need see a need to change any of our policies for the 2023-2024 snow plan. So just a quick summary, I've been through a lot of this before. You've seen it all before and we've talked about it. But I do want to mention that we plow routes in priority order to the level of our capability and that what the storm allows us to do. If we start exceeding our capacity, we drop routes in reverse priority order. So historically, most of our storms are less than 6 inches. And as I mentioned, we don't really anticipate having to modify our usual storm plowing strategy, which is to plow the priority 1 and 2 routes for the category 1 and 2 snowstorms. Okay, moving on to forecasting. So these are the sources that we use when we're planning for a snowstorm. 2 of them we pay for, Skyview Weather. We pay to give us very specific forecasts for Aurora. And then the DTN service we pay for, and we get specific forecasts for Aurora, but on an hourly basis. So we can see the trend in the snowstorm, and that can really help us decide what resources we need to get through the storm. But I bet you're all wondering what's going on for this coming winter. Usually we like to consult the woolly caterpillar, but he was a little indecisive this year. So we're going with the Farmer's Almanac and the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, or NOAA. So Farmer's Almanac is saying it's going to be cold and we're going to be getting our average snowfall. It's going to probably feel like a lot of snow because we haven't seen anything close to our average for several years. NOAA is predicting an El Nino, which means north part is going to be a little bit warmer and drier, and the south is going to be a little bit wetter. But as you can see where our Colorado flag is, we're right in the middle. So for this season from November to January, they're predicting a slightly higher temperatures, but probably around our average, our historical average for precipitation. And then from the beginning of the year through to February, they're then predicting close to our historical averages for temperatures and remaining with historical averages for our precipitation. So that's it for my presentation. This was brought to you for information only, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Questions to staff?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
All right. Thank you so much for the presentation, Lynn. I did just want to circle back to the question I had for you at TAPS with regards to Cimarron and Harvard. That's still identified as a priority 3 route, while Heather Gardens Way and Marina are priority 2. And then, of course, Sable, Iliff, and Yale are all priority 1. Cimarron and Harvard are often used for folks coming out through Marina to connect to Iliff, and of course by the large single-family neighborhoods that they run through. And one of the complaints I get all the time is that Black Hawk and Abilene and Elkhart and Wesley and Marina and Heather Gardens Way are always done, but that route through the middle that connects a lot of these folks to Iliff and Sable and beyond are often unpassable or very difficult to navigate. So I had asked, why is it that that's a priority 3 route as opposed to a priority 2 route, given its high use and its fairly close proximity still to educational facilities and of course to a retirement community?
So we did look at that, and I'm preparing a memo to get back to you about that. It would be challenging for us because Cimarron there north of Iliff has, or is it Yale? Yale has driveway access on both sides of the street, and we have no place to store the snow. So it would become a challenge for us to actually do that and keep it open with no place to store the snow. And also we took a look at the ADT, that average traffic. It's a little dated, so I'm trying to get some more updated numbers, but it was less than 500 per day. So it might seem like it's high traffic, but in 2016 anyway, it didn't have as much traffic. But like I said, I'm trying to get some better counts an updated counts on that. So for right now, for this season, we have it still as a green route. And my memo to you will include a lot more information.
All right, I appreciate that. Mayor, can I ask a follow-up?
Continue.
Thank you, sir. So I also notice, and I've neglected to mention this at TAP, so I apologize. AFR, when they deploy out of sevens, they often go down Blackhawk rather than going through Abilene. So I'm wondering, is this maybe just another area where we are kind of operating off of dated information? Because it seems like their preferred route to get to Heather Gardens, which is more often than not where they're headed, is to go down Blackhawk. So they go straight as opposed to, taking the longer way around Abilene. So is that something that you could, maybe we could have staff follow up with them on and see what their preferred route is?
You actually asked us that last season, and so we did look at it. I apologize that we didn't get back to you with an answer. The route that you're mentioning that they prefer to take is, again, we're constrained with by parking on both sides of the street, and
Sure.
we have no place to stack the snow. We did talk to the commander. I think it's Station 7, Lucky 7 there.
Yep.
And they use that route, but they said they've never had any problems getting through. So based on that, until they come back to us and say they have problems getting through, we're going to go ahead and leave it as it is. But if they start having some real difficulties getting through, we'll work with them to make sure that, one, they can get through there, and then two, we'll take another look to see if it needs to be added to our plan.
All right. And there's one final comment for you, and that is I understand the concerns around parking on Harvard and Cimarron, but we have the same conditions on Wesley and Elkhart. So that's not quite going to mesh with my constituents when I tell them that, right? So I'd like a more thorough explanation on that one when you do provide.
Absolutely. We'll include that in the memo when that's coming your way.
All right. Thank you much.
Sure.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, Lynn, thank you for the presentation. As you know, Southeast Aurora, we're at 6,100 feet elevation, so sometimes you get more snow. So when the plows are deployed, are they kind of evenly, we don't just start up north and head south, right?
Right. We actually have two. We deploy out of North Satellite and South Satellite. And prior to a storm, we run a snow watch. So if we see one area of town, and you're exactly right, Councilmember Bergen, your part of town does tend to start icing up and stuff a little bit earlier, we'll deploy to that area before we deploy to other areas. But it's all a function of the snowstorm and the characteristics of the storm that are coming in, and based on what they're seeing on our snow watch.
Thank you, Lynn.
Sure.
Further questions or comments? I want to encourage all the members to go out one night when we do have snow, to go out with one of the drivers. It's an amazing experience, and you really appreciate the dedication of our staff in terms of keeping our streets safe. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mayor, do we get to drive it?
No.
I think we need CDLs.
Especially in that Councilmember Bergen, that's pretty scary. Think of. Okay. 3C, Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. Matt Chapman.
Mayor, point of order.
Yes.
We hadn't been able to hear from Kathy Snell because she wasn't on. I don't know if we were going to have her go as soon as she was here or later in the agenda.
So is Ms. Snell ready?
She's nodding her head.
Okay, please go then. Let's see. So that's
Yes, I am ready. Thank you so much. I apologize. I think we got our wires crossed about when the item would come up on the agenda. So I was waiting for a text. So appreciate if shall I go ahead now?
yeah. Just let me. This is 1A1 2023 Aurora Mental Health and Recovery ARPA construction agreement. Please proceed.
And I am going to share my screen here. I am not as good at this particular model, but hopefully we'll get it going here. Here we go.
It's working.
All right, excellent. First barrier. So I just thank you, Mayor Kaufman and City Council members, for having us here to just do a quick update on our Safety Net Campus and Acute Care Facility Plan. We've been working hard on this. We've had the opportunity to chat with many of you, but providing this update is something that we certainly always look forward to. So just a quick reminder that we're building this campus in 3 phases. Phase 1 is our acute care building, and we are bringing together crisis walk-in services, crisis stabilization unit with 16 beds, detox with what will be an increase to 45 beds, connect to care, which is same-day walk-in access to all services, and enhanced substance use treatment services. So that includes medication assisted treatment, which is a critical service for both alcohol and opioids. And we're, by doing that, really eliminating both first responder and public questions about where to go. So in phase 2, we are adding permanent supported housing through a partnership with Aurora Housing Authority that you've also been generous in supporting and I think are fairly familiar with. And I'm doing, there we go. And this was initially our phase 3 of this project. It got changed. Phase 3 was the 3rd parcel. The permanent supported housing is now phase 2. And our phase 3 is providing the opportunity for a mission-focused partner to provide complementary services. You probably recall that early on, we were working with Stride around providing primary care and dental care on the campus. They have not been able to commit to that, to developing a site there. There's been a lot of changes at Stride, as many of you are probably aware. So we've put that a bit on the back burner. We definitely want to make sure that we have the right 3rd partner for that campus. We've been getting a lot of input from the public, from legislators around what might be most needed there. So having some discussions around potential for use services, still keeping on the table the idea of primary care or other healthcare services. But we're really focused right now on completing our phase 1 and then phase 2, which the Aurora Housing Authority is just about 6 to 9 months behind our build for our acute care center. So very much in process as well. What is really exciting to us about that housing option is not only bringing more housing to the community, but housing that is really specifically designed for the population of individuals who have serious and persistent mental illness and substance use disorders. Knowing that housing for this population is extremely important. A great number of our unhoused citizens do struggle with these disorders. So here is our site development plan. As I noted on the slide before, phase 2 and phase 3 are reversed. Phase 1 does specify the acute care building that we're constructing, and what is called phase 3 here is the multifamily housing. So the housing, as a reminder, is building 43 units of permanent supported housing for adults. And you can see that obviously this is a technical drawing that shows a lot of the zoning and what we have been working hard with the city and the planning commission to move forward. The next slide is a rendering of our final design. So we've been working with Davis Partnerships, who has great experience working in in the trauma-informed care space really understands comprehensively behavioral health design and the needs of a behavioral health facility, especially one that is 24/7 acute care. There are a lot of very specialized aspects of design for a building like this that they're very familiar with. So we very much relied on their expertise. Again, the services that will be there, and then the funding picture, which we'll go into in a little more detail. Right now, we completed the building design in August. We are working with the city planning department on final approvals for the site plan. And then we expect the site plan construction to begin just after the first of the year. Certainly, depending on that snowy and cold weather that we were just hearing about, that can always, have an impact. But with site plan construction beginning after the first of the year, we would then expect our building construction to begin in about March. And we expect, if we're able to stay on that time frame, occupancy about July of 2025. So about an 18-month process overall. Here is a rendering of the other side of the building, really just to kind of demonstrate the trauma-informed campus development approach that we are taking. Obviously, those trees aren't going to come fully grown that way, but this just kind of gives that sense of that campus feel. The building that you see to the left of our building is the housing that is closest to the street, and the third parcel will be kind of in the position we're standing in as we're looking at the building here. You can see that the building it's 2 full stories. The third level provides some, just a partial third level that provides some space for staff and community. It's really hard work to work in a 24/7 program like this, and we want to make sure that we're also taking care of our staff, giving them a place to take a break and to get off of the floor and de-stress. So here is our project schedule. You can see that we are here in 2024, finalizing building permits and working on some of the permit and site permit completion here. And we are there. The things that are on the right are really things that we're tracking internally around status and potential risks that we're seeing. Certainly one of the risks that we're seeing is that we've encountered about $650,000 in additional site costs based on our work with the city department. They are for a variety of things. And some we would really like the opportunity to further discuss. And those would include they're requesting that we reseed, that we seed and irrigate the plot that Aurora Housing Authority will be building on in 6 months. Something that it's at a cost of about $125,000. There is the cost for tree replacement, which I know is a standard thing. We think we may have heard that there could possibly be some grant funding available that could help with that. It's almost a $300,000 cost in our budget. And then finally, there is a traffic signal that, as we understand it, was in place before we even purchased the land that we are being asked to pay toward. And I don't have the full information on what that cost really entails for us, but those are the pieces that if possible, we hope to have continued discussion about any potential around those particular pieces. And I will talk a little bit more about where our budget stands and why that's important to us.
And
Mr. Mayor, this is Debbie Stafford. If it's okay, for some reason I'm not showing up on camera, but Kathy, the traffic signal, we were told by the city was valued at $125,000, and it was put in place before we purchased the land and the property. So we are being told we have to pay for it, and we will be asking to consider not having to do that since we didn't own the land when it was put in.
Thank you, Debbie, for a little bit more color with that. So our original fundraising goal for this project was $32 million. That did not include the cost of the land. That is a cost that we took on as an organization. We have that we have that land financed. So our $32 million budget was build cost. And as you can see when we look at this picture, if the final piece comes into place, which is our work with the governor's office, with their commitment to match local funds, then we are essentially at our goal. And that is the final piece that we are still working on. And we are very, very grateful to city council members and to Mayor Kaufman for your help with this. It has been kind of an ongoing discussion. We have a meeting tomorrow with the governor's office. They've requested that just be with staff to talk about continued strategy. We are getting positive signals from the chief of staff and others around an outcome here, but we have also recently learned that any ARPA money that goes unspent that was state directed ARPA funds has to go back through a legislative authority for spending. So that was one consideration for how that this could come to pass. So we are going to be talking with them about additional considerations tomorrow. And we also, we've had another building sale since that we'll bring to the proceeds of which we will bring to the table. So we do have backup plans in the case that this 8.5 million isn't fully funded by the state. But really our goal is for that full 8.5. We also are seeing cost increases, of course, in a project like this that spans time. That happens. And so we are looking at other funding opportunities, both internal to Aurora Mental Health and Recovery and some other opportunities that can help us close that final gap. But we are really, I think, very, very grateful to the city, to you all for your support of this project, to the counties and others that have really gotten us as far as we've gotten with our funding goals. We absolutely could not have done this without the city kind of stepping out in front, and we're just very grateful for that support.
And Mr. Mayor and Kathy, if I can also add, Member Bergen, along with the mayor, has also really stepped up with us in our work with the governor's office, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, Debbie. Very much appreciated.
And I just want to say, in meeting with the governor's office with Debbie Stafford, I just thank God that I was on the same side of her, not on the opposite side. She's tough. Oh, wow. Okay, is more to your, okay, questions?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coons.
Yeah, so I just have a question to direct to staff regarding the tree question, and you may not have an answer immediately. So I think this would actually be to pros. I know forestry received a grant regarding improving the tree canopy and equity in having an adequate tree canopy throughout the city. I don't know if that can apply to a project of this kind where they're replacing trees, or if it's only for putting original trees or new trees in areas that currently don't have adequate trees.
This is Brooke Bell with Parks, Recreation, Open Space. I do not have a great answer for that, but I will look into that for you, Councilmember Coombs.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. It was also brought to my attention that I guess the facility is being charged, or rather this overall project is being charged for covering the cost of an existing street signal. And I was just wondering if there's someone from Public Works that could comment on that.
Hi, Councilmember Marcano. This is actually the first I've hearing of this, so if I could have a little time to check with staff on that, I can get back to you in the council.
Yeah, and it's the signal on Louisiana and Potomac, if I'm not mistaken. So,
thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation and all you do for our city.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Item number 3C, Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. Matt Chapman, Fire Battalion Chief, Aurora Fire Rescue.
Yeah, good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name, like I said, Matt Chapman, with the Office of Emergency Management and currently assigned as the emergency manager for the city. I don't have a long presentation tonight or a PowerPoint for this item. What we're essentially bringing is a plan for readoption that's had minimal changes. So we can provide just a brief background on that. The title to our item, the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, is really the umbrella title for all of our emergency management plans. So everything fits under that title. So the two documents that you have that we're asking to be moved forward, the part one, the base plan, and part two, roles and responsibilities, essentially make up the framework for what is our emergency operations plan for the city. And that is on a 3-year cycle. So part of our emergency management grant funding, the state requires us to go to council for readoption every 3 years with that plan. So really that's the basis of moving that forward. The last plan was adopted January of 2021. So we're kind of on that cycle to get that back through and readopt it. So that's where we're at with that. It really lays out what the state and the federal government and what the city of Aurora requires uniquely to be included in an emergency operations plan. And we run through that checklist to make sure that we have all of those items. Again, minimal changes. I think, for example, something like Tri-County Health, the public health roles and responsibilities didn't change, but obviously Tri-County is no longer an entity anymore. So that was changed to each individual county health department. So there's been some updates to that effect, but really nothing major in the last 3 years. So we're asking to be moved to regular council and readopted. And with that, I'll pause for any questions.
Questions or comments?
Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Medina.
Councilmember Medina.
Thanks, sir. Yes, Matt, thanks for the info there. I just have a question around, do you have any specific plan around any, like if there were to be a plane crash in this city itself proper? Just because I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, the city, a lot of the planes enter through our city in the back end, and also with the Buckley airspace, a lot of those planes are doing circles around the community. If those were to land in a community, do we have a plan for that?
We do. We have an annex for an airplane crash, and you're right. We've looked at our commercial airline flights and the flight path through there, and our military, and we've trained. Aurora Fire has trained with several times since I've been in this role on how to approach a military aircraft and address some of those situations. So we do have plans in place. We have an annex for airplane and the airplane crashes, as well as some policies and procedures for, once again, the more details with the fire department operations.
Okay. I think, Matt, there's a meeting coming up with the Colorado Air National Guard to do some tabletop exercises on aviation accidents, military aviation accidents.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, 3D, intergovernmental agreement for RAPO countywide transit and micro mobility study. Tom Worker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner.
Thank you. I am bringing up the presentation. Okay. Yeah, I'm Tom Worker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner. Thank you, Mayor Kaufman and council members. This item is coming to you from the TAPS Policy Committee and is an IGA with Arapahoe County for a countywide transit and micromobility study. Focus will be evaluating opportunities and needs for transit services within the urbanized area of Arapahoe County, with a focus on how to complete commuter trips and where people are coming from or going to. This will also look at the potential for micro transit and micro mobility, such as bike share or scooter share, as well as which first or last mile connections need to be addressed. Recommendations resulting from the study will be tiered in short, medium, or long-term recommendations and will include a pilot project. The entire effort will be done in coordination and input from the RTD Sub-Regional Service Council. Study will inform future transit efforts, including future examinations of RTD's transit network in this area, as well as future updates to our own transportation master plan, which is getting kicked off now. These are the project partners in the study that are financially contributing based on population and employment share. These are a mix of both local cities as well as transportation demand management associations, which of course are tasked with providing additional choices and encouragement to commuters in ways of getting to work besides driving alone. Project will have $1.455 million in total funding with a 90-10 federal-local split. Aurora is contributing $40,000 and contributions from other partners are shown here. So with that, does the council support moving this IGA to the next available council regular meeting? And I'm also available for questions if there are any.
Questions or comments? Is there any objection to moving it forward? Seeing none, it will move. The IGA will move forward. Thank you for the presentation. 3E, 2024 water and sewer fees. Cat Alukoten. Did I say that right? I'm sorry.
Yes, close enough.
Close enough for government work. Sorry. Please proceed. And first pronounce your name so I know I remember it.
Yes, Kat Olukochen. Yep, the Deputy Director of Financial Administration with Aurora Water. So I am going to share a presentation that we have for City Council regarding the proposed 2024 water and sewer rates and fees. So let me see. So I am hoping that you can see, let's see. Let me share that again.
Pat, just go ahead and share one screen. Just do one screen and bring the presentation up and share that screen that you have.
Okay, that's what I'm trying. Let me see. Okay. Did that work?
It's there.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to put it in slideshow view.
Yes. Yep. Can you all see the presentation now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So to start, as I mentioned, Kat Olukochen here, and I'm going to go over the proposed water and sewer rates for 2024, and then have Marshall on the line, and he will take over the fees update. for 2024 as well. So starting with rates. So Aurora Water operates as an enterprise fund, and so our services are being supported through a cost of service basis. And the policy of the city is to examine utility rates for the cost of service process routinely to avoid the rate shock that occurs when rates are evaluated less frequently. And so our policy is to review our rates annually, and then propose rates at smaller increments as opposed to waiting a couple of years without increments and then having the double-dip increments. And so in 2023, this is just a sort of a comparison of where Aurora was in water rates compared to peer cities. And last year we proposed at 4%, pretty similar to Fort Collins, Castle Rock, and Denver, and Side City. Then a couple of other utilities had higher water rate increases. So for 2024, our proposed rate adjustments are 5% for water, 7% for sewer, and no increase for stormwater. And then in the upcoming slides, I'll talk over why this increase is necessary. And please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions as I go along.
Have my copy. What is, I think we charge for individuals outside of our jurisdiction or outside of the city of Aurora if we're serving anyone. I think it's 150% for residential. Do you know what Denver charges?
So they have an outside rate, yes. I don't have it at the top of my head, but they do have a separate rate and separate fees for outside entities. And I think it really depends on, whether it's a multifamily group or et cetera. But they do have different rates for their outside city.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually, just briefly, Mayor, they have two types of customers. They have a wholesale customer and a full service customer outside of the city. So when they provide full service, it's pretty close to 1.5 times the charge, similar to ours. When it's a wholesale customer where they provide wholesale water to another small entity, and that entity provides the distribution of the water to the individual customers, is significantly less. I think it's like 1.2 times. Actually, I'd have to double check on that one. Okay. So the full service customer is close to 1.5. The other one's significantly less, but it's a wholesale customer. And then that customer provides individual service to their customers.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on, at this point, we have shared what we expect the rate increases needed all the way to 2028. But as I mentioned earlier, we do update and review the rates annually, so these can certainly change. But this is what we're expecting at this point. So some other driving costs, PFAS, increasing costs, some of the changes, the federal changes that have come regarding PFAS have had a pretty big impact in operational costs, primarily by the number of times that VAC has to be changed in a year. And so sort of high level that it's about a $2 million per year impact. And PFAS, the PFAS increase alone is driving almost half of the 2024 water rate increase. Natural gas costs have also increased in 2022, electricity costs, and then the purchase of treatment chemicals have also increased significantly. They've increased 9% in 2022 and actually 70% since 2021. So those are some of the high-level driving factors. Some other driving costs, obviously the capital improvement program for a 5-year capital improvement program is around $1.4 billion. We've had an increase in additional capital expenses since 2022. primarily driven by labor costs, cost of services purchased by contractors, reinforcing steel and structural concrete prices have increased, and supply chain issues continue to plague the construction industry, as well as inflation and capital cost. And so for since 2023 alone, capital costs have increased about 24%, and that's what we're expecting, or we're budgeting for 2024. Capital projects require debt and ongoing revenue adjustments. Part of the sewer increase is Metro Recovery's water rate increase for 2024, which is proposed at 7%, and they're proposing 6% for 2025. And of course, general inflation and capital projects and operating costs. And then for sewer, we do have a sewer capital projects for the next 5 years, which are a total of about $250 million, with the majority around half for system improvements and $127 million for development. And here are some of the big projects that are included in sewer capital projects. There's also been an increase in regulatory changes at the federal level. I already mentioned PFAS and some of the changes regarding PFAS. There's also lead and copper rule revisions. The EP overhauled the lead and copper rule, and the utility is going to have to make significant changes prior to October 2024 to develop an inventory of all service lines. And I know you're all familiar with a lot of these, but these have also impacted the expenditure side on the utility. And then the big one, Waters of the United States, or WOTUS. In May of 2023, the Supreme Court issued its decision on Sackett versus EPA. And what this means is that CDPHE will engage in enforcement of unpermitted dredge and fill material into state waters. And the city is working with CDPHE on what exactly that's going to mean for us.
I'm sorry, could you, because I thought the Obama administration, so the decision went against the Obama administration on WOTUS, right?
Mayor, it did. The challenge with WOTUS is that the state of Colorado has decided to pick up what they're calling gap waters. And the state of Colorado is being very aggressive with the gap waters. So what the federal government left on the table, the state is picking up, and you will hear more about what we call dredge and fill, where they're requiring that we come along and do a lot of redundant reporting and monitoring, and then some additional on top of the redundancy. So we're in the process right now of trying to, the state's holding stakeholder processes. We're trying to sort through that to minimize the impact, but the federal decision, while positive, resulted in a state reaction that will cost us quite a bit of money.
Well, I'm sorry, what is the gap you mentioned?
Yeah, gap waters is what the state is calling the waters that are not now captured by the federal regulation. And they're saying we need to come along and regulate those waters that now the federal government is not going to regulate. So they're calling those gap waters.
So it's just as bad as WOTUS then. I mean, so basically it's WOTUS. Waters of the United States. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually right now, the way it sits is a little bit worse. We're hoping to get it to be better than that, but right now it's worse.
Wow. Okay. Please proceed.
So for 2024, our proposed water rate increases are 5%. And we did put this slide with the proposed water rate increases for different peer cities, just to show where we sit. We didn't list here Colorado Springs. They will not increase their rates in 2024, but they are slated to increase their rates in 2025 by 6%. And what is the 5% increase impact on a monthly bill? This is for water only. For the average user, it's about $1.64 for the average summer user, about $5.13, and for the high user, it's about $26.50. And so the average user will experience an average monthly increase of about $3.73. Our 2024 proposed sewer rate increase is 7%. We included some information here on Colorado Springs as well. We are in line with some of the other utilities in terms of what they're proposing for 2024 on sewer rates. And what does this mean? It means that depending on the meter size, you'll see different increases. But for the residential one, which is about the first line here, it's about a 33% increase. And then we have here stormwater, and we're proposing no increase, and so there will be no difference from 2023 to 2024.
Why is it, let's see, maybe a little high. Can you separately break out multifamily? Do you have that?
Yes, and so we have a couple of slides ahead where we talk about the different parts. I think that might help. So yeah, we'll talk about multifamily specifically.
Okay.
Just to give sort of a comparison of where we are, the average national water and wastewater increase is about 4%. Aurora's water bill annual increase is about 2.5%, and you can see the red one here is the national average of water and sewer inflation index, and we are here in the blue, so we are trending lower than the national average, and that's very deliberate. And so I like this slide because I think it explains really well our policy, which is we're looking and reviewing our rates annually to make sure that we are covering all of our revenue needs, but also doing it in a very deliberate and sort of stepwise way as opposed to other cities. And so you can see here, starting from 2021, it's been steady increasing. But then if we look at other cities, sort of like Granby and Longmont, Greeley and Brighton, they're sort of more all over the place. Granby didn't have increases in 21 and 22. And then in 23, they increased it, close to 25%. And Longmont increased it in 21, and their process is to actually ratchet it down year over year. Greeley had moderate increases in 21 and 22, and then they're ratcheting it down as well. And then Brighton actually had a really interesting where they had a really high fund balance, and so City Council directed them to spend it. And once that was done, then they set up increases for 22 and 23, and they're also ratcheting down in 24.
Do we know anything about Denver in terms of peers? For future reference, it'd be great to have, because they border us and they're somewhat our competitor, as I see it, from an economic standpoint.
Yep.
Yeah, we can, maybe Mayor, also, if we can back up, we don't actually have a slide that shows rates for multifamily any different than that last slide. So maybe Kat, back up to the meter size slide.
This one?
Yeah, so this is the one that would show the rate comparison for sewer and storm. Multifamily is captured in here. Multifamily typically has larger meter sizes. So They might have a 2-inch or a 3-inch meter. And you can see they would go from maybe $80 a month, 82 to 87 or 88. So the increase of 563, the rate impact is very small. What we're proposing through the water and the sewer rate increases are actually very modest. Our costs have gone up, our operating costs have gone up 10%. We're proposing a 5% rate increase in water and a 7% in sewer. So the multifamily, again, sewer increases are captured here on this slide. And you can see they're in the, for most multifamily, unless they're a really large multifamily, they're going to be less than $10 a month, down in the $5 or $2 per month for those large meter sizes.
I have a question, Mayor.
Councilmember Bergen.
Marshall, who determines the size of the meter for
So the
multifamily?
So the size of the meter is going to be dependent upon the number of units and the demand that goes through to serve the number of units. So a 20-unit multifamily complex would probably have a 1.5-inch meter, for example. You get up to a 250-unit multifamily, and they're probably going to have a 4-inch meter. So, and these are, I should make sure this is clear. These are so yeah, existing, proposed, and you see the meter sizes.
Right. But so what if they are very efficient with their, the toilets, the faucets, blah, 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 the shower heads? It doesn't change really the size of the meter then too much because it's more.
It can, yeah. And I was actually going to talk about that a little bit when we get into the fees. So the fixture efficiencies can make a difference the way we calculate our fees. And then that does impact the flows on both the sewer and the water side. So if they have very efficient fixtures, their tap fee comes down, or can, and again, I'll talk about that later, but also their water use comes down, and it's the water use in the winter quarter average, the winter months, that sets the sewer rates. So the lower water use affects sewer and water. It lowers their rates. It really lowers their usage. The rate stays the same. I should clear on that. So the volumetric rate stays the same. Usage goes down. You multiply it, and their bill is lower.
Okay, thanks.
Please proceed.
Mayor.
Councilmember Combs.
Yeah, so I had a question about the 0% stormwater rates. There's a 0% increase this year and a lower increase than other services in the out years. So does that have to do with our regional partnership and the costs we're incurring there, or what is the reason for that lower rate increase there?
Yeah, very good question, Councilwoman Coombs. We do have, in the stormwater side of things, we have a lot of regional infrastructure, as you noted. And so Mile High collects their taxes. And recently, I can't remember the name of that, but their ability to collect revenue increased. They got rid of some limits. I can't remember the name of what they did. They debruced, right? So they collect a little more revenue now. Some of that is benefiting us. And so our stormwater infrastructure is kind of interesting because unlike sewer and water, we have a different revenue source we're able to tap into there. So some of that is buffered by the debrucing, the opportunity to bring a little more revenue into the regional infrastructure. It's also a little bit less of a built environment, so we're able to take advantage of natural channels. We have to go in and modify some of those, but the construction cost impacts have not hit us quite as hard in the stormwater world either on our side of things. So maintenance for stormwater, very few chemicals, mostly labor. So again, a few different factors contributing to that, keeping that rate, or we're able to keep that rate consequently a little bit lower.
Please proceed with the presentation.
Okay, so one last thing before I jump into fees, I will point out that even with the rate increase we're proposing, we will still be in the lower third of the metro area, the Front Range area for rates. So extremely competitive. And I think you've all seen that slide. I could show that slide again if you would like, or we could move into the fee presentation. Would anybody like to see that slide? Okay, everybody's seen it. Okay, fees. So as Kat mentioned earlier, we're an enterprise fund, so rates cover operating costs. So the cost to operate, maintain, and replace or rehabilitate our system is covered in rates. Fees cover the cost of growth and system expansion. So we keep those revenues very much segregated. Some of our, and you'll see when we get to the comparisons, some of our neighbors who are not having to grow their systems are built with capacity to accommodate the development that they're seeing, their fees are lower. But our system, as we're expanding into the Northeast area, we're expanding, we've annexed a few new areas, we're having to plan for a lot of new infrastructure. And our biggest cost driver in this world is water rights. So acquisition, development, and management of our water supply. So next slide. So I'm going to start with the easier fee from some perspectives because it's much lower. Our sewer connection fee, again, based on our infrastructure needs, system expansion, and very closely related to Metro wastewater, or Metro Water Recovery, they've rebranded. So Metro Water Recovery handles treatment, and they're increasing their fee by 7.8 to cover the treatment world. Our fee, which is higher than that, has to cover the collection system and pumping, or having to install pumping in some of these new areas, or lift stations to lift the sewage out. Some of those costs are captured in the sewer connection fee. Next slide. The connection fee overall numeric number is much lower, but the needed increase is higher percentage-wise. So we're saying we need a fairly large percentage increase, but I'll get to some slides in a minute that show the dollar impact of that increase. So next slide. So this is the revised fee schedule for what we need. And you see the total fee over there on the right. Not huge for even these meter sizes, but again, the percentage increase we need is fairly significant. So because of that, we need a 60% fee increase, but because it's large, we're proposing to spread it out over 3 years. So next slide. So you can see where we are today in the left-hand column, the current fee, again, a fairly small fee compared to a lot of our growing neighboring entities. And then you see what we're proposing for 2024, an increase of 20%, 2025 and 2026 to get to where we need to be revenue-wise to build all of these new interceptors, collection system, et cetera, and convey this to Metro. Next slide. Water fees. So water fees are numerically a bigger cost impact on the developers. So spend a little more time going through these. Next slide. So I mentioned earlier that our water connection fee, almost 80% of our connection fee is associated with water resource cost, development, and source of supply. So building reservoir storage projects, conveying the water into town, paying to acquire the water rights, take those through water court, etc. That's about 80% of our connection fee. And it shows up in the category of the water resource fee. From 2020, our water resource acquisition cost has gone up about 400%. We did last year, to minimize cost impact and create more equity in the system, we created a recoverable usage fee and a non-recoverable usage fee. So these, the 8531 applies to water we're able to recapture and reuse over and over again, because we don't have to go acquire and develop new supplies. The more we can use that over and over again. The non-recoverable is $115.10 gallons per day of use, because when it's consumed, we have to bring new supplies into the system to offset that. Next slide. So our water connection fees today are on this slide. I think you've all seen this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It does capture our different categories of customers or classifications: single family residential, multifamily, commercial, and irrigation. All of these are based on that gallon per day of use demand. So we have what's called a volumetric fee. Next slide. This one shows our proposed 2024 connection fees. I will say the commercial table on this slide has a mistake. There should not be a 1.5 or 2-inch flat fee here. We're going to straight volumetric calculations there. So with the commercial customer classes above 1 inch, they come in and they provide estimates of exactly how much water they're going to use, and we apply that $85 or $115 per gallon per day to their usage and create their fee. Irrigation, you can see we have a water conserving and a non-water conserving. Those both have the 115 per gallon per day applied to them, but the water conserving uses much less water. So these are per square foot of landscaped area. Next slide. So we've got a few examples in here, and then due to some questions and discussion that has come in from a few council members and some developers, I've got a few supplemental slides after we're done with this presentation. Next slide. So this is an example of a single family detached connection fee. And you see that the connection fee for a small two bathroom unit with the lot size of 7,000 square feet, which is not the smallest we see, would be about $28,000, which is very competitive. And we'll have a slide that shows that. Next slide. This is a scenario with a larger single family footprint, 3 to 4 bathrooms. Water use goes up, and the fee for the indoor use goes up about $5,000. So these also, I will say, do include the Metro sewer fee, our sewer fee. So these are the fees for water and sewer comprehensively for these examples. Next example. Okay, and this one is multifamily. So this multifamily example is for a 20-unit multifamily complex with a 1.5-inch meter. You noted I mentioned earlier that as the number of units goes up, those meter sizes go up. But this shows what our fee would be for this type of a multifamily complex. You see that the sewer charges on here are based on the meter size. So for 20 units, we're looking at about $370,000 for this example. Next slide. Okay, so this is a comparison in the single family space. This was in your packet. We had showed you earlier our 3 to 4 bedroom example. I will note on this table that some of these other entities don't adjust down their fees as the size of single family goes down. So while our fee goes down to 27,000 something for a 1 to 2 bathroom, some of these others don't go down, some others do go down. So you can see though, for a 3 to 4 bathroom, we compare very favorably in the single family space. These are based on the volumetric uses of a single family home. Single family indoor usage tracks very closely to where multifamily usage tracks. The indoor use does not vary hardly at all in our data from single family to multifamily. The biggest difference comes in the outdoor use.
Marshall, could you explain Denver?
Yeah, so Denver, you noticed earlier I mentioned that Denver's system is essentially built. Denver hasn't acquired or developed new water supplies in forever. So for Denver, what they're relying on is that people who are connecting and paying these fees are tapping into supplies they already own and infrastructure that's already built. So because of that, their fee is extremely low. This is their inside service area fee. Their outside service area fee will vary a little bit depending on the type of customer again, but it goes up probably about 30% for an outside service area customer, but it's still lower than what we can do.
Wow.
And again, that's primarily because they're relying on water supplies they already own. We're having to acquire and develop new supplies and new storage. They have built some new storage, but they also charge their ratepayers for a lot of that storage because it was built as drought resiliency rather than for growth. So we will, just being frank, we will never be able to compare to Denver in the foreseeable future. I don't ever see a scenario where anybody on this list or anyone in the Denver metro area will be able to compare to Denver from a connection fee perspective. Rate-wise, we can compare because our operating costs and theirs will continue to both go up, but they may have a little bit of catching up they need to do on the rates, but fee-wise, they're not ever going to catch up.
Mayor.
Councilor Rocco.
So I probably should have asked this a few slides ago when you were talking about what the things are that our rates cover or our fees cover. One of the things that I know we're starting to talk about is direct potable reuse. So are any of those chemical or treatment fees or infrastructure fees related to that direct potable reuse infrastructure? And then how would that kind of a program, the direct potable reuse program, impact our costs in the long term?
Yeah, great question. It's a complicated question, but great question. Direct potable reuse right now, none of our fees or rates really have any costs for direct potable reuse in there. We're still in kind of the evaluation phase. So we're spending a little bit of money to evaluate what it would look like and to pencil out both the costs and the cost offsets. So if or when we go to direct potable reuse, we will have some cost increases for certain things, including some chemicals or treatment processes, but we'll also see other cost decreases, including for some chemicals and operating costs. So we are trying to again, we're evaluating all of that right now, trying to come up with the most cost-effective way to implement that. We would likely then permit it so that we could implement it, but then we would weigh the costs and the benefits to time the implementation when it makes the most sense and has the least impact. It would likely then impact primarily our ratepayers rather than growth, because it's part of that water we already own and are just using over and over again.
Thank you.
Yep.
Please proceed.
Okay, so the next slide on here that we just passed, this one shows kind of the effects of our water conserving versus non-water conserving landscape. So one thing we wanted to note here is if you compare our outdoor usage fees, this is one of the impacts of changing our fee structure. You can see that now we're kind of in the middle of where we were before, where the outdoor connection fee comparison for water conserving applications affords developers the opportunity to save money. With that, I wanted to go to probably the slightly more controversial slides that we pulled together today in response to some of the questions and feedback. So if I can share real quick, I will show that. I can't tell what's showing up. Is anything showing up?
Yeah, it's the single family residential slide.
Okay, perfect. So this, yeah, the black and orange, thank you. So this slide we pulled together today, it's probably not perfect. We struggled a little bit figuring out how people are charging stormwater fees. So some of these have stormwater fees built in and some may not. Ours have the stormwater fees built in. These are the same roughly numbers you saw for the single family comparison that we showed earlier, where Aurora compares very favorably. The addition on this slide is the Denver outside compared to the Denver inside. So you see that increase, not quite 30%. For single family residential space. So we're going to compare very favorably to our neighbors. Now, one of the reasons is a lot of these neighbors have, again, flat fees. They're not volumetrically based, so they don't go up or down depending on the volume of water or the size of the indoor use. Ours do. So ours can go lower. Some of these others won't. So Denver, for example, when ours goes down to 27, theirs stays where it shows on here. Most of these others, Castle Rock has a volumetric fee, so theirs, I believe, goes down a little bit. Most of these others stay where they are. That's not the controversial piece. The more controversial piece is our multifamily space. So commercial works pretty well. It's very straightforward. Again, they calculate their demands. We review their calculations. They pay a fee based on the volume of water that they use. Multifamily, we've taken the data similar to what we did with the single family and attributed it on an average annual basis to a fee calculation for a per unit of multifamily. You see on here, there's quite a bit of variability in this space. So you'll see Denver inside and outside. They're considerably lower for their inside city customers versus outside city customers, but both scenarios are still more affordable than us. That will probably stay that way. Other entities, so ECCV is a groundwater-based system. So they are pumping groundwater. When that groundwater starts to run out, which we forecast will be in the next 20 to 30 years, they're going to have to figure out how to come up with a sustainable system, and their fees will go up. But until then, they can keep their fees low because they're not acquiring and developing water, they're just pumping groundwater. Parker is a groundwater-based system as well. However, Parker already has a $1 billion project on the books that's not been captured by these fees. When they move forward with that $1 billion cost, their fees will go up considerably. On here, Aqua is a little bit of an interesting example that is groundwater and some other interesting water supplies based. Their fees will eventually have to start catching up as well. Castle Rock and Thornton both have built into their systems acquisition and development of new supplies. And so you see the consequence when entities have to do that. So Aurora started developing sustainable supplies sooner, so our costs are lower. But again, most of these others are not volumetrically based calculations. So Thornton, Castle Rock, and Aurora have volumetrically based fees that are actually looking at the cost to provide water. The others have some kind of average meter size based system that doesn't account for that for various reasons that I just explained. So this is an example for that small 20 unit, 1.5 inch meter example that I showed earlier, but this shows what our neighbors look like. Then it can get a little more separation as the demands go up. So this is a 250 unit multifamily complex, and you see that, make sure that's right. Yeah, so these are hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost. Now we're in the millions of dollars of cost when we go to the 250 unit example. And you see what happens to Castle Rock and Thornton, who've built in water resource costs to their fees, and you see what happens to Aurora. So they get a little further ahead than us because our system is a little bit older and more mature, but the costs definitely go up. Sorry.
Oh, well, Marshall, does this, how about, is there any sort of economies of scale here, you know, where we want to, if we want to encourage density? Now, I don't believe in subsidizing, you know, certain projects for others. I want them to pay their actual cost, but isn't there a value in density, and ultimately doesn't that influence lower costs?
Yeah, so very good question, and two answers. So right now, I talked about our single family fee methodology and our commercial fee methodology, which are both very refined based on this volumetric approach. Our multifamily space is not quite as refined. It uses data, again, averaged over all multifamily complexes. So what we have allowed in a few cases of large multifamily complexes that get to that economies of scale type example, as you mentioned, is we've let these multifamily or mixed use developments operate as commercial. In other words, they can come in. We've allowed them to hire engineering firms that come in with water use reports. So they can calculate based on the newer, more efficient fixtures, boiler units, appliances, etc. They can come in and provide a water use report to us on which we can base the fee calculation. This is the default that's built into our fees. We can, and we will, if council would like, allow multifamily of reasonable size. It's not going to make much sense down in the 20 unit type example, but if we get to maybe 50 units or more or somewhere in there, we could let them provide a water use report, which will bring these fees down considerably. They then get assigned an allocation. based on that volumetric calculation, and their fee, again, goes down considerably on the water and often can go down on the sewer as well.
That'd be great.
Question.
Councilman Bergen.
Thank you. You mentioned they can operate as commercial. So what are the commercial fees?
Well, they can operate in our fee calculation process like a commercial. So commercial above 1-inch meters, they come in with that water use calculation. So we ask them, what are you doing? How much water are you using? And show us how and why. Then we calculate their fee based on that, either $85 per gallon per day or $115, depending on if the water comes back to us or not. And we calculate their fee for each one of those connections on a customizable scale. That's when I say we can treat multifamily that same way. That's what we would do with them. We would say, come provide to us not just your fixture counts, but what kinds of fixtures, what kinds of water savings appliances are you putting in? How much water use are you going to use? Or how much water are you going to use? And then we calculate the fee based on that exact use. So we can treat the larger multifamily developments that same way. It would then maintain that equity and fairness, like was mentioned, where nobody's subsidizing anybody else, but it also would make sure we're not overcharging any of these multifamily complexes for water that they're not going to use. So, for example, if they have we don't keep track right now. Do they have 3 bathrooms in there? Do they have 1 bathroom? We don't track any of that. But allowing the larger ones to come in and tell us what they've got will base their fee accordingly. And most of these larger developments, the fee would come down.
Good. But there's no, is there a range to that?
It's going to totally depend on on exactly what they're doing and how aggressive they're being with their fixtures, their water use. Some of them, again, the larger ones will have large cooling systems or boilers. Some will not. Some will have common laundry facilities. Others will not. So it's going to vary. And it will depend, again, on how aggressive they get in the water conservation space.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Mayor.
Councilor Arco.
So a follow-up on that, I understand for the smaller projects, it probably wouldn't even make sense for them to spend the money on that type of a water report. It wouldn't result in that much cost savings. Are there any other things that we could reasonably do while still being equitable to incentivize kind of that more gentle density, like smaller multifamily type project?
Yeah, so one thing we need to do, you notice I mentioned we've used data that goes back maybe 10 years in this multifamily space. One other thing we can do, but it would be difficult to get done in this cycle. One thing we need to do, and I did commit to Councilman Marcano earlier, we need to go back and look at the data, and I talked to Jason about this as well. We need to trim out the old inefficient multifamily spaces that were put in 20 years ago or 10 years ago, the historic ones. And we need to focus on the products that are going in today and redo the usage calculation based on that. So I can definitely commit to do that. We're not going to be able to get that done soon, but if we wanted, one thing we did look at is we could cut our fee increase in half for this year. And instead of the 26% fee increase in the water space, if we do a 13% plus allow these large multifamily, the customizable fee, then we could commit to council to come back before the fee increase next year and have all that latest and greatest multifamily data embedded in the fee.
Great. And Marshall, it would seem that the larger the project in terms of density, the greater the savings potentially from conservation. Is that correct?
In the outdoor space, yes, for sure. The indoor space, it will depend. It will depend on, again, how they approach cooling and laundry and things like that.
Right. But the potential is greater.
Potential is there, yes.
Okay, yes. Further discussion? Marshall, is there anything else?
Excuse me, Mayor.
Oh, Councilmember O'Connell.
No, I just want to thank Marshall for, continuing to look into what we had discussed around multifamily. And I guess I wanted to follow up a little more on your suggestion, because I'd like to know more of what the impact would be than if we just cut those fees in half this year. I appreciate, maybe us being able to do that. But I guess would it be financially wise? Would we actually be continue to still maybe cover the costs there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it could have a small cost impact if we come along next year with whatever we don't do this year. The cost impact would be probably less than 1% of an impact next year. The fees are based on our roughly 10-year capital project acquisition, development, water supply plan. So they've got a lot of costs that have not hit us yet. But we are dependent upon collecting revenue now for those costs that hit us later. So there would be some cost impact, but it would be manageable if we do it over 2 years versus if we start getting out beyond 2 or 3 years, then the cost impact starts going up considerably because we've missed out on collecting revenue to cover costs. So good question.
So I guess, Mayor, if I can follow up on that point.
Please do.
If you think it would pencil out to do some kind of reduction, just because, under the assumption that what we're currently estimating is, dated information, to put it mildly, I would be comfortable with that. I just don't want us to get into a situation then with rates and fees where we end up with like some of these other jurisdictions, right, where they've kind of tried to lowball their, ability to keep up with costs, and then suddenly they have a 20% increase and people can't absorb that, and it becomes a big political football as well. So I want us to be responsible, but I also think we should be incentivizing multifamily development and, again, frankly, infill, so that we can make the most out of our existing infrastructure. So I'd like us to move in that direction. That's my 2 cents anyway.
And Marshall, just let me say this, that I appreciate the fact that you're making adjustments on an annual basis. And I think it's important to do that. Because I think it's what Councilmember O'Connell said. I think it was the city of Arvada that for a long time didn't do any increases, and then all of a sudden had to do very significant increases, and there just was a revolt there.
Yeah.
Westminster.
Was it Westminster?
We used to do.
There's actually a couple of them.
Oh, it's Westminster. That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there further questions or comments? I say, Marshall, there's no action on this, correct?
Well, we do need it to move to the floor, and so I guess the question I would have, if we can get some kind of sense, do we want it? And we don't. Half is as low as we could cut these and minimize the impact. We could reduce them 25%, which would probably be safe in ensuring that we're not overcharging any multifamily developments. So would that be agreeable to maybe do a 25% reduction on the fee increase for this year, come along with all that data? Also, we have and would continue to allow the large multifamily to operate in that fee calculation space based on the volume of water they use. So our fee increase would not be 26%, it would be 6.5% lower than that. So 19, we could do 19 or 20% instead of the 26. And that would be protected.
I'm sorry, the 25% reduction and their ability to do the report that you mentioned on conservation to get an additional reduction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion? Is there objection to moving this plan forward? I'm sure members will have additional questions as this moves through the process, but without objection, it will move forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marshall. Appreciate it. I think you're up next. Well, let's see. Councilmember Sundberg, Stancia Springs.
So actually, Mayor and members of council, I'm going to take this one. Earl Wilkinson, Assistant General Manager of Operations for Aurora Water. Yes, ma'am.
Please, I'm sorry. I thought we were on 4A.
Get Councilmember Bergen there, Mayor, I think.
Okay, I don't know how I got you in there. Item number 4A, Councilmember Bergen.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to say that this is very preliminary. So staff is going to give just kind of an update on metro districts and service plans. But that I want to make it clear that we're going to be doing, or staff will be doing stakeholder outreach to get more input before anything goes forward. So this is really information only. And turn it over to Jacob.
Okay, please.
Yeah, hi council. Let me pull up my presentation here. Are you all seeing my PDF?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So good evening. So I just wanted to give, as Councilmember Bergen alluded to, just kind of a general update. These are some things that we've been kind of tracking over the last couple of years. I'll just give a brief overview. I'll try and keep it brief, and then kind of a reminder of the updates we made in our Metro District service plans in 2021, and then some things that we're looking at doing now for 2024, and we are doing some active outreach at the moment. So just kind of a brief overview. So Title 32, special districts of the state, those are an independent form of government elected by the eligible electors of the district with the statutory ability to charge rates, tolls, fees, levy taxes, enter into contracts, incur debt, and construct, operate, and maintain facilities according to its service plan. Special districts must comply with state law regarding audits, budgets, elections, and have a board of directors, service plan, open records and meetings, annual notice to electors, aka the transparency notice, which I will go over shortly, and compliance with TABOR. DOLA, Department of Local Affairs, has limited oversight of special districts regarding annual budget and regular elections. They may administratively dissolve districts for missing budgets, elections, audits, as long as there's no financial obligations outstanding. And then the approving authority, us as the jurisdiction, has limited oversight, typically reserved to the service plan requirements and approval, which we'll go over. So a little background on the city. In the 80s, city leadership realized that metro districts served a vital purpose in constructing public infrastructure. Based on our tax base, metro districts allow the cost of that new infrastructure to be funded by the property owners who benefit rather than subsidized by all of the city's residents. State statute requires a service plan. It establishes those powers and guidelines. 2004 was where our current model came to be, and we've had updates since, but it's largely remained the same template from 04 with some updates. And then the city obviously approves that formation, but then it's an independent unit of government once established. There are typical types of service plans. There are 3: single district, single service, multiple district, multiple service, and primarily we see multiple district single service plans. So our 2021 updates that I mentioned, those regarded some definition updates with clarity around the procedures, engagement, financial plan, and operations and maintenance. There was a new provision in state law for requiring districts to create and maintain a website for their community when applicable. Annual reporting, including language to clarify information, including in that annual report, and then disclosure to purchases, which I've got an example here. So we made that a more easily understood document. It used to be 6 or 7 pages, so we boiled that down to 2, and I have an example of that here. So this is a service plan that you all actually approved this year with a good example, and so it goes over kind of the total debt issuance authorization based on the entire district, that max mill levy, and then it breaks it down. The example here that we pulled is for a $500,000 home, for example, within the district, and that comes down to just over $2,100 a year for taxes on the district. So this is a really good, clear, transparent notice that we've provided now in our service plans. So for 2024, things that we're looking at, and this is a response to things that we're dealing with outside counsel, with developers. on a daily basis in terms of some issues that we've come across. And so one is the return to a requirement for an IGA for operation and maintenance of public improvements or special design features proposed by developers. We used to have this language, so this is nothing new. This is actually just reverting back to some language that we had in our service plan prior to 2018. And so a lot of Metro District service plans already have this language. Over the last several years, that went away. We're going back to it. And the reason for this is particularly around some special design features that we're starting to work with developers on, taking on maintenance. And we want a real clear chain of title once that district goes from a development board to a resident control board. And so we think that that's the best way to do it and promote transparency for the district and the city. Examples of these could be pavers and private roads, sidewalks, special median landscape features. That's something that we're working with some developers in the Northeast on right now, where they'd like to do, for example, some tree plantings where the Parks Department doesn't want to take on the maintenance of those in an arterial. So we're working with some developers that could we put those trees in areas where the district could take on long-term maintenance. We could do the rest of the medians that could comply with our typical parks or Aurora water standards for the irrigation. And then the developers could drip irrigation trees, for example, and they take that maintenance, but we would have an IGA to capture that. So that's just one example. There are other things that we've encountered this year. And so this language did exist in prior service plans. And then identification of the district as residential or commercial. We think it's important just to address the difference. And then adding the requirement to update if there's a change in the zoning of the property between single family residential and commercial. So commercial would encompass multifamily, but particularly that single family going from commercial to single family, for example. Process improvement for dissolution is something we're looking at, clarifying provisions for a district to dissolve to ensure the city's ongoing needs are being met. Inclusion of a statement that the authority delegated to the counties by statute is expressly conferred to the city. We ran across some ambiguities based on state statute this year where the authority actually resided with the county and the city council establishes the service plan and approves the service plan. So we just want to add a provision to clarify the city's authority under that statute. Another item was clarifying the obligation of the district to have a seated board. Other policies, these ones are a little bit more contentious that we wanted to just broach and discuss here, but we are going to vet these. So requiring an engineering estimated construction cost as an included exhibit with new service plans or debt limit increases. This is something that some districts have not provided. They're not required to today. A lot of jurisdictions do require this. We've started to see some of the bigger developments in the 470 corridor actually provide this proactively. I have an example in the presentation here for Windler that has an approved master plan, and they actually submitted an engineering cost. And so we feel that it just adds clarity and context for some of the questions that your constituents might have regarding, why we're approving a particular debt limit, for example. Another update that we were just exploring was the requirement to have a development application submitted prior to taking the service plan to council. This, in our opinion, would allow for confirmation of project context through a formal land use submittal versus speculation. So there's some question around, maybe a pre-application meeting would be sufficient, and that's something that my office facilitates. So this is just an item that we're exploring, nothing firm right now, but this is something that we'll obviously do some outreach with the Joint Task Force, Development Community, and District Council. And so this is that example that I mentioned. So Windler has an approved service plan from 2021. Total debt limit in that plan that was approved was $850 million. So the breakdown on that engineering cost was $667 million. And this is high level. So we're not, as staff, actually, reviewing this thoroughly. It's really more for context because the developers at this stage, they're going out to the bond market and talking with a lot of the developers. We do outreach on these questions. They're saying, I've got a master plan, for example, in the case of Windler, we know at a high level what this infrastructure is going to cost over the next 20 to 30 years. And so it's a high level estimate that they're putting together. But, and so this is the context of that master plan: 840 acres, 5,000 residential units planned, 2.4 million square feet of mixed use and commercial. And this development is actively underway. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mayor, just want to make a statement.
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, and on the IGA, again, this will, I think Jacob is meeting with the Joint Task Force in a couple of weeks, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
To get kind of vet this. But on the IGA, just on an example, I live in Towns Reach, and we actually have spent about a year having to go through boxes and boxes of documents because there was kind of some disagreement on what parcels of land were owned by the Metro District versus the city and who was responsible for maintenance and watering and so forth. So back to, having that IGA would have helped to clarify that and not have both sides spent just tremendous amount of time on that. So just wanted to add that as an example for the IGA. And then on the high level cost estimate, again, not getting into very specifics because sometimes a development is estimating cost. However, we know with inflation, things completely changed in terms of how costs escalated. But also, it's hard to predict, a build out, if you do phase one and a build out happens 20 years down the road, what the costs are going to be.
I have a question as well. That, and this is more of a finance question, but that, so they go to market to sell the bonds, and then they and tell me about how this process works. Are they buying the bonds back themselves? And how is I assume that the market sets the interest rate. Is there a conflict of interest there?
I can't speak. I see Jason popping up. I can't speak to the buying the bonds themselves, but the bond market, yes. So essentially, they're bonding for public improvements, like a municipality would do. So they've got the ability to do that, like any jurisdiction would do at those interest rates. So I know the bond market, like buying a house today, the bond market interest rates are quite high right now, and so that is something that they face as well. And so I believe the plans that came in 2021 had a much easier time bonding for those improvements based on the interest rates. The other thing that we see, and I'll let Jason jump in, is that there's historically districts have requested a higher debt limit to account for refinancing in the future. And so if they get a 5 or 6% interest rate and the Fed reduces rates down the road, they've needed to have the perception of that extra ability. So they might take out initially an $800 billion initial debt limit, but they take out $200 million in bonds. They want to have the ability then to not have to come back to council every time to ask for that for refinancing. And so that's one thing that we've seen that we're kind of looking into as well. Do we need to have that higher limit to account for refinancing?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add, Mayor, we can get you more information. I'm far from an expert at it, but when metro districts are first stood up and there's not a lot of assessed valuation in the ground, there's kind of a unique circumstance of issuance there where they're often considered, they call them dirt bonds just because they're literally financing off of no infrastructure in the ground, so that they will have to issue dirt bonds. There's a set of regulations around that in terms of since they're issuing through the metro districts, they're only for allowable expenses. Any interest rates they're issuing at, I think, do have to pass certain tests in terms of what those are. But I think we can get you more information if you're interested in that, that startup time in terms of when they're doing that dirt bond issuance.
And Mayor,
Councilmember Bergen.
it doesn't basically the risk is still on the bond issue.
The bondholder, yeah. And I think in some cases with dirt bonds, sometimes the developers will, as the mayor indicated, potentially, the developers will be the ones to purchase those dirt bonds. I think sometimes when markets are good, they're able to issue them on the market, in which case the market will dictate some of those terms. But anytime there's a debt issuance, it is on the bondholders, whether those are the developers themselves or the market that are buying the bond. The risk is with the bondholders that there could be a default.
Okay. Further questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any action required?
No, that was information only. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. 5A now, Councilmember Sundberg, small solar system facilities, reduce setbacks.
Thank you, sir. This is an opportunity to install a couple of solar farms on a sliver of land in between, to the east, Dad's landfill, the Lowry Superfund site, and to the west, the Plains Conservation Center. Now, this land is deeded, so it's with special restrictions, it's not viable for traditional development, but it would make a great solar farm. There are incredible benefits from it. Over time, the projects would yield $74 million in energy assistance to lower income residents. It would help power 6,000 homes. And on Saturday night, there were a number of us at Ready to Work. If you're at Ready to Work, raise your hand. Thank you. So upon completion of these projects, Ready to Work Bridge House would benefit $500,000. Now, there is a little bit of a hiccup with this whole thing. The county of Arapahoe has a restriction in that there's a setback of 2,000 feet from designated outdoor activity areas, which includes the Plains Conservation Center. So this is closer than the 2,000 feet buffer. So we're looking for a variance and approval from the city as just sort of a show of support. Jeff Baker, County Commissioner, seems to think that this will have no problem passing in Arapahoe County, but we just want to show our support. And here to shed more light on the solar project is Nicole Affleck from US Solar.
Thanks, Councilmember Sundberg. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I do have a presentation that was teased a little bit earlier this evening. Thanks for having me here, Mayor and City Council. Nice to see y'all again.
Adrian, are you able to load up that presentation? Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'll keep it brief. US Solar is the company that I work for. We're developing the projects that we call the Lowry Community Solar Project. On the next slide, there's a little bit of information about US Solar. We have offices in Denver, which is where I'm based, and we own, develop, and operate community solar gardens across the country.
Sorry, Nicole, sorry to interrupt, and I apologize if anybody else is not having the issue, but you're kind of coming in like a little garbled or staticky. Is that just me?
No, it's true.
No, it's a little garbled.
Is this better at all?
Seems
Marginally?
like.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try. Is this any better? Now I'm just on my phone.
That sounds pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll just be holding my phone up here. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Sorry about that. So like Councilmember Sundberg described, our projects are at a unique location here, just outside the boundary of the city of Aurora and between the Plains Conservation Center and the Denver Arapahoe Disposal Site and the Lowry landfill. This location will host a total of 30 megawatts of community solar capacity, which is enough to power 6,000 homes every year in the area. The land is, we call these the Lowry projects because they're on land owned by the Lowry Environmental Protection and Cleanup Trust Fund. Next slide. So here are some of the benefits. Councilmember Sundberg highlighted some of my favorite ones. You can read the rest, but they will create a real meaningful impact to both the city and the county. And we've designed them to not only produce clean, reliable electricity at a rate that is affordable to low-income customers, but also to match the existing visual character of the community. And the next 3 slides, you can just sort of go through those quickly. Those are images of some existing operational community solar gardens of comparable size that US Solar owns and operates. These are all actually in Minnesota. That's where most of our projects are now. So you can just kind of flip through these slides, Adrian. A couple highlights here are we use agricultural style fencing, and we cover the entire area with pollinator friendly to really, to try and blend the projects into the agricultural community. So the setback variance that we are talking about here was actually incorporated into the Arapahoe County Code after these projects had already started the permitting process. So there are two parcels within the Plains Conservation Center that are considered designated outside activity areas. The red parcel has the red setback. The yellow parcel has the yellow setback. Each of those are 2,000 feet. And our blue, kind of grayish blue shaded properties are where our projects will be located. So you can see that yellow 2,000-foot setback really cuts into that western parcel. It would likely result in the termination of the two projects that are on that western parcel. There's two projects on the west and then 4 projects on the eastern parcel. So that would be unfortunate. It would cut by a third those benefits that we talked about on the previous slide a couple slides ago. And it would severely impact the donation to Ready to Work Aurora, because that's associated largely with one of the projects on the western parcel. And as you all know, the Plains Conservation Center is within city territory and is actually owned by the city. So that's sort of why we're talking to you now as the owner of the designated outside activity area, to work with you on this setback variance. The next slide is, there's an update to this since the last time maybe this update was incorporated. So since the last time I spoke with some of the members of City Council, the Board of County Commissioners approved the variance pathway for this 2,000-foot setback. So now we have a way to ask for a variance. And what we're asking for you all now is approval of a city resolution in support of that request as the owner of the Plains Conservation Center. I've heard the same thing from the Board of County Commissioners, particularly Commissioner Baker, whose district these projects are in, that they don't think this will be controversial. But because you all, the city owns the land in question, official support from the city will go a long way. And I'm hoping that these projects will be built and be built soon and deliver all of the benefits that we've been talking about. Happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Questions or comments from? Seeing none, is there any Councilmember Sundberg, I mean, do we have to vote on a resolution, or is this?
I think we would go forward to a regular session.
Okay.
We'd pass a resolution, hopefully.
Okay. 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 Is there any objection?
I have a question here.
Councilmember Bergen, then Councilmember Lawson.
So we're not doing a letter to the county, we're doing a resolution?
We had a couple of choices there, per Janine Rootstadt. She gave us a couple options. We thought this would just be more solid in our signal of approval.
And then the resolution goes to the county commissioners?
Yes.
We would communicate that, yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councilmember Lawson?
Mayor, my question was addressed by Councilmember Bergen, so.
It was Councilmember Murillo that wanted to speak.
Councilmember William?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Sundberg for taking the feedback that I had shared at the policy committee. I had asked for staff to reach out to the county. I also had a question on why it was a resolution as opposed to some other means of communicating, since there seems to be open lines of communication, certainly from the staff side and otherwise. So I was a little indifferent on the vehicle. I think my biggest thing was just asking that we reach out if the spirit is cooperation, engagement. Didn't want to just drop this on them without them being aware. So thank you for doing that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Is there any objection to moving this item forward to the floor? Item number 5A. Seeing none, item number 5A will move forward. Councilmember Sundberg.
Yes, Mayor, if you've ever driven up to Strontia Springs Reservoir and that small, narrow, dangerous road, looks like something out of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It needs repairs and safety, and this is what this is about. I'll turn it over to staff.
Yes, thank you, Councilman Sundberg. Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Earl Wilkinson. I am the Assistant General Manager of Water Operations for Aurora Water. Purpose of this is we have an intergovernmental agreement with Denver Water. We share the operation and maintenance of Strontia Springs. Denver has a responsibility of 84.27%. Aurora has a responsibility of 15.73%. The project that was being referred to, basically we have a narrow roadway and a narrow area for a boat ramp out there that we have currently. We are going to enlarge that area by building out some retaining walls and putting in more width for the road and the turnaround area and boat ramp. And in order to do that, the two cities are projecting that the cost of the project will be $2,420,211. And that will handle everything from permitting, design, construction management of the project. And our portion of that project will be $380,699.19. This project will begin late this quarter and also progress into 2024. So the dollar amounts will be spent over a little bit of this year and the remainder in 2024. And this is just basically to address our funding that is a requirement per the IGA. If there are any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Bergen.
Well, why is this not in an amended IGA then? Because I thought when we had like a cost adjustment that it would just be an amendment to an IGA. Is this already in the budget?
So this is an existing IGA that we amend every time there is a project over $250,000.
Right. So it's an IGA,
yes,
not a resolution.
Well,
that's what I'm just confused because we normally just do an amendment to an IGA, I think.
This one's a little bit unique in that it spells out in the IGA the process that we follow for projects over a certain size. Under a certain size, we don't follow the same process, but this is the process outlined for projects over 200 and whatever thousand, like Earl mentioned.
Okay, but it'll still have to be reflected in the original IGA, right?
It's captured in the IGA already.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, how the costs break out. And again, we just have, for the large projects, we just have to go through a separate council approval process, but it is already outlined in the IGA.
Okay, thanks for that explanation.
Other questions or comments? Seeing that, is there any objection to moving item number 5B forward? Seeing that, item number 5B will move forward pending which Indiana Jones movie are we talking about?
I can just picture the big rock rolling down this road, Mayor.
Item number 5C, resolution expressing the Aurora City Council's abiding support for the people of Israel. Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And obviously, this would come today and then go to our full council for a vote. And the resolution really aligns with President Biden's statement that was offered on October 7th. So it's a resolution of the City Council of the City of Aurora, Colorado, expressing the Aurora City Council's abiding support of the people of Israel. Whereas the City Council of the City of Aurora recognizes the importance of expressing solidarity and support for nations and their people during times of conflict and turmoil. And whereas Israel, a democratic nation in the Middle East, has historically faced complex and challenging security and political issues. And whereas the people of Israel, like all people, deserve to live in peace and security, free from the threat of violence and terrorism. And whereas the people of Israel have suffered a brutal surprise attack on a major holiday in an apparent attempt by Hamas to derail efforts to improve relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And whereas the repugnant attack against the people of Israel is the deadliest in decades, with thousands of Israelis killed, wounded, or kidnapped. And whereas the City Council condemns acts of violence, terrorism, and discrimination against any individual or community, regardless of their background or beliefs, and stands firmly against any form of prejudice or hatred. Now, therefore, it be resolved by the City Council of the City of Aurora, Colorado, that the Aurora City Council resolves as follows: that the City of Aurora explicitly condemns the unprovoked violent terrorist acts by Hamas on innocent Israeli victims. 2, that the City of Aurora expresses its support for the people of Israel in their pursuit of peace, security, and prosperity. 3, that the City of Aurora disavows groups that advocate and organize in support of anti-Semitism and violence against the Jewish people. 4, that the City of Aurora mourns the loss of life and reels from the shock of this still unfolding horror of torture, imprisonment, and murder. 5, that the City of Aurora acknowledges the historical and cultural significance of Israel and its importance to the global community. 6, that the City of Aurora encourages dialogue, understanding, and cooperation between the city and organizations representing the Israeli community. The resolution take effect immediately without consideration, and it will be signed by the mayor.
Questions of the sponsor? Comments?
Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, so I definitely support us putting forward a resolution condemning the attacks by Hamas and supporting the Israeli people. I would like to propose an amendment to the whereas clause, the final whereas clause, to include within violence and terrorism after those two words also war crimes, which both Israel and Hamas are under investigation by the UN at this time for war crimes in this conflict, as well as apartheid, which Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have recognized as occurring at this time in that region.
Well, I would say I am not amenable to that at all. Israel was attacked by Hamas, a terrorist organization, brutally, and they have a right to defend themselves. Even the President of the United States has conceded that they have a right to defend themselves. And Hamas has violated all laws of war. I mean, what they have done is atrocious. And if that would have happened to the United States, I don't think we would say that we were committing war crimes by defending ourselves and trying to take out a terrorist organization that is not only a threat to Israel, but to America as well, because they have asked for the annihilation of Israel as well as the annihilation of America. So no.
So right now we're discussing the Coombs amendment. Since it's study session, we don't have second. So further discussion on the Coombs amendment to the resolution.
Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
I would just add that since the statement in question by President Biden, he has called on Israel to also follow the laws of war, because there is a concern that that is not happening at this time.
And may I state, Mayor, what the laws of war are under the law of armed conflict? They involve distinction, military necessity, and proportionality. And we cannot equivocate the beheading of babies and raping of women with Israel defending itself.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there opposition to the Coombs amendment? The mayor opposes.
Kerensky. Zavonic.
Lawson.
Gardner.
Bergen.
I've got the mayor, Councilmember Drinsky, Councilmember Zavonic, Mayor Pro Tem Gardner, Councilmember Bergen. Is there anyone else? Councilmember Lawson. Okay. Majority have risen in opposition. The amendment will not go forward. Further discussion on the Bergen resolution.
Mayor,
Councilmember Medina.
yes, sir. Yes, I'd like to see if we can do a change in number 2, that the city of Aurora expresses its support for the people of Israel and Palestine in the pursuit of peace, security, and prosperity.
Very well. Discussion on the Medina amendment to the Bergen resolution.
Mayor Drinsky.
Drinsky.
Councilmember Drinsky.
Yeah, it's very sad. It's very sad any innocent casualties that can come from this situation, especially the children in Palestine. But it is no secret, and it's very public, that it is the people of Palestine that elected Hamas to govern them. And if you read the charter, Hamas's charter, it is about complete genocide of the Jewish state, of the Jewish people, complete genocide. It is the Palestinians themselves that elected Hamas to govern them. So this moment is about Israel. That's what this is about. I am not agreeable to amending any of this. When a resolution was brought forward condemning the tax on the LGBTQ community down in Colorado Springs, I pushed back on that. I said, then we need to be condemning all hate. I was outvoted 9-1, 9-1 on that. I said, you want to stand against hate? Stand against all hate. So you don't get to turn the tables now. You do not get to turn the tables now. What happened to the people of Israel is the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. I don't know why we're going to sit around and we're going to try to amend. This is a moment for the Jewish people and the state of Israel. And anything you want to amend to this, I pray that my common sense colleagues will not allow it to happen. This moment right now is for the Jewish people.
Okay. Further discussion on the Medina amendment. Seeing none, is there opposition to the Medina amendment? Mayor opposes.
Zavonic.
Johnson.
Gardner.
Bergen.
I'm sorry, Mayor, Councilmember Zavonic, Councilmember Lawson, Mayor Pro Tem Gardner, Councilmember Bergen. Did I miss somebody?
Sunberg was in there.
Sunberg? Okay, very well. A majority of risen in opposition. The amendment will not go forward. Further discussion on the Bergen resolution.
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So I would like to offer an amendment for item 3, and that is to, after the organize in support of anti-Semitism, I'd like to add comma Islamophobia, and then following Jewish and the violence against the Jewish, and I want to add or Palestinian people.
Mayor Jurinsky.
Councilmember Jurinsky.
Yeah, it is not Islamophobia to defend your people. This wasn't an act of war that happened against the Jewish people, against the state of Israel. This was an act of terrorism. This is an act of terrorism. So I'm sorry that I'm not seeing Islamophobia in protecting its people. Israel has a right to protect her people. Period. That's it. It wouldn't matter what country did this, what people did this, what race, what gender, wouldn't matter. Wouldn't matter in Israel. It wouldn't matter in any other country. It wouldn't matter anywhere else in the world. So there's no Islamophobia here, and you guys can keep going around. I'm sure Crystal's next. I'm sure Crystal Marino's next with some sort of amendment, and you guys can play this game all you want, and you can detract and detract and detract from what really happened. But let me tell you what really happened. Jewish babies were beheaded. That's what happened. Allison Coombs, think about that. Think about your son being beheaded. Would you care who did it? Would you care who did it? Would it matter what religion they were? What race they were? Would it matter? Do not try to turn this around into some sort of Islamophobia. You don't get to have that moment. This moment right here is for the Jewish people and the state of Israel. Try again, Juan. Try again. You're going to get 6 against you on that. Crystal, you can be up next. You're going down 2.
Okay, further discussion on the Marcano amendment,
Mayor,
Councilmember Combs.
just that today in the news, there was a child who was stabbed to death as a result of Islamophobia that has resulted from some of the discourse around this issue. It's absolutely tragic. Hamas did engage in a terrorist attack, and just as we saw after 9/11, people in our country are engaged in Islamophobia on that basis. And so I do think there's a valid concern there that we should be thinking about.
And let me just say, in a separate proposal, I would I've always had a concern about Islamophobia, and I don't know that any other member or any other elected official in the city, other than myself, routinely goes to the mosque for Friday prayer, because I think it's important to stand shoulder to shoulder with our Muslim residents, that they know that I support their right to practice their religion without fear of discrimination or intimidation. But I think that the focus here is not to encompass everything. It's to talk about the incident that has just occurred with the attack on the state of Israel. Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, I actually thank you, Mayor. This is about what happened to Israel and what happened to that child. I can't remember what city it was, but that's horrific. But this is about Israel.
Further discussion. Seeing none, is there opposition to the Marcano amendment? Mayor.
Jurenski.
Wilson.
Bergen.
Gardner.
Thunberg.
Very well, majority have arisen. The Marcano amendment will not move forward. To the resolution.
Mayor.
Councilmember Moreno.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about our including our Palestinian community members too, I would have also asked for and Palestine to be added to number 5 and number 6.
Discussion on the Murillo amendment.
Mayor, I object. I'll just go ahead and object.
Further discussion.
Yeah, and I also think it's really important to uplift the changes that we are making and the changes we aren't making. I think we all have very much agreed to the first section that we condemn the unprovoked attacks on the innocent Israeli victims. So I just think that's important as well, but we can call the question as well.
Very well. Any further discussion on the Murillo amendment? Seeing none, is there objection to the Murillo amendment? Mayor objects. Objection to the Murillo amendment.
Gardner.
Lawson.
I think it's the same people.
Okay, Councilmember Zalak. Very well. Murillo amendment will now move forward. To the resolution. Councilmember Bergen.
First of all, I don't understand doing amendments at a study session, but I just asked my colleagues, there is nothing in here that is wrong. It is in support of Israel and it condemns Hamas. So I would ask that you support it without any changes.
Councilmember Bergen, Mayor Jurenski.
Councilmember Jurenski.
Councilmember Bergen, I would say at this point there is no point in saying anything further. If you even have to defend this, there is a terrible moral compass on one side of this council. So I say we rest this in silence.
Okay, very well. Is there opposition to moving the Bergen resolution forward? Seeing none, the Bergen resolution will move forward. Item number 5D, rules of order and procedure, amending the procedure for public hearings and appeals before City Council. Rachel Allen.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I'm Rachel Allen with the City Attorney's Office. Tonight, the City Attorney's Office brings you a resolution for your consideration. This resolution proposes to modify the council rules. The modification would would be in addition to the council rules. Currently, and for a long time, there's been the procedure for public hearings in the council rules, but for appeal hearings, the council rules have been silent. The way council traditionally has addressed this is whenever there is an appeal hearing, during the adoption of the agenda, council votes on how much time the applicant, the appellant, gets to present their case. What this would do is include, add the process, the procedure for appeal hearings to the council rules.
The discussion? Is there any objection to moving the resolution forward? I think none, the resolution will move forward. Seeing no further business before the study session of the Aurora City Council, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.